Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human researched and written material.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so imagine a family that is literally entrusted with the salvation of the human race.
Right, a massive responsibility.
Exactly. I mean, they carry this divine promise, this cosmic mandate, that the whole world is going to be blessed through their bloodline. And their immediate response to this staggering responsibility is to literally rip off their youngest brother's clothes.
Yeah, it's brutal.
They throw him into a dark pit, and they sell him to a human trafficking caravan for the price of, like, a disabled slave. And they do all this while sitting down to have lunch, just listening to him scream.
It really just shatters any illusion we might have about the ancient world being filled with these, pristine, flawless heroes. The dysfunction here is just staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to think of epic family dramas,
Yeah.
right? Like the betrayals, the inheritance battles, siblings just tearing each other apart. We think of that as a modern invention, like something cooked up for a premium cable network.
Right, like a modern boardroom drama.
Exactly. But long before any of those contemporary boardrooms existed, there was this narrative. It set the absolute template for ambition, toxicity, trauma, and, eventually reconciliation.
And that's what we're looking at today.
Yeah. Today's deep dive is an extensive exploration of Genesis chapters 37 through 50. We're pulling directly from the ancient text itself, but we're also bringing in some classical, deeply human research commentaries.
Specifically the works of Matthew Henry and Albert Barnes, which are just incredible.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
We want to unpack the historical and moral weight of this narrative. Our mission for you, as you listen to this, is to really extract the practical wisdom here. This isn't just a history lesson.
No, not at all. It's a mirror. If we look closely at this sprawling epic of Joseph and his brothers, we find a disturbingly accurate reflection of human nature.
It forces us to confront so much, right?
It really does. It forces us to look at how we handle envy, how we navigate sudden power, how we process deep trauma, and, honestly, what the actual mechanics of true reconciliation look like.
So to really grasp the gravity of this, I think we have to look at the baseline, the world these people are actually inhabiting. We're dealing with a pastoral, patriarchal family living in the land of Canaan.
And when people hear pastoral family, they usually picture this peaceful, idyllic farming life, like a quiet little homestead.
Right, a nice little farm.
But the reality of the Middle Bronze Age Levant was, well, it was anything but idyllic. It was a brutal, precarious existence. Being pastoral nomads meant their survival depended entirely on finding water.
And grazing land in a really volatile climate.
Exactly. And structurally, this specific family is just a total powder keg. Jacob, the patriarch, has children by 4 different women. You've got 2 wives who are sisters, locked in this bitter, lifelong rivalry for his affection, and their 2 handmaids.
So the emotional infrastructure of this family is basically built on jealousy and manipulation.
Yeah, and constantly shifting allegiances.
And hanging over all this domestic chaos is the Abrahamic covenant. The belief that the creator of the universe has chosen this specific, messy group of herdsmen to be the conduit for divine blessing.
The stakes are just existential. Who gets the primary inheritance? Who gets the blessing? Who leads the clan?
And all that tension basically comes to a head with a single piece of clothing. So in Genesis 37, we meet Joseph. He's 17, the son of Jacob's old age by his favorite deceased wife, Rachel. And Jacob doesn't just, quietly favor Joseph.
No, he broadcasts it to everyone.
He makes him a coat of many colors. Or, I guess more accurately from the Hebrew, the ketonet passim.
Yeah, a long-sleeved, ornamented tunic that reaches down to the palms and the ankles.
Which, this wasn't just a dad buying his kid a flashy designer jacket, right?
Not at all. In the ancient Near East, working men like shepherds out in the brush, they wore short, sleeveless tunics so they could actually move and do the physical labor.
Right.
A long, ornate, restrictive tunic is the clothing of an overseer. It's the garment of someone who literally doesn't have to do physical work.
So it's a massive statement. Matthew Henry's commentary hones in on this perfectly, right?
Yeah, he notes that the coat was this tangible, highly visible badge of distinguishing love. It signified that Jacob intended to basically bypass the normal laws of primogeniture.
He was going to leapfrog the older sons and give Joseph the privileges of the firstborn, which is crazy because it fundamentally threatens the survival of the older brothers. Giving him that coat is like a CEO publicly handing a golden parachute and the keys to the company to a teenage intern.
Right in front of the senior VPs who actually built the business?
Exactly. It's a direct threat to their future power and their wealth.
And Joseph, whether it's just youthful naivete or a total lack of social awareness, he just pours gasoline on this fire.
Oh, man, the dreams.
Yeah, he starts having these dreams. He dreams that his brother's sheaves of wheat bow down to his sheaf in the field. Then he dreams that the sun, moon, and 11 stars representing his whole family bow down to him.
And he doesn't keep it to himself. He actively gathers them around to tell them about it. I always cringe when I read that part.
It's hard to read. Albert Barnes observes that Joseph's frankness in reciting these dreams shows a spirit completely devoid of guile. He's only dimly conscious of the massive implications of these visions.
But to his brothers, these older men who have spent their lives sweating in the fields, fighting for scraps of their dad's affection,
the meaning was incredibly offensive, and his enthusiastic telling of it just made it unbearable.
And the text points out a really terrifying psychological progression here. He says his brothers hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him.
That phrase is chilling.
It is, because it maps perfectly onto modern behavioral psychology regarding the anatomy of violence, right?
It absolutely does. It starts with a breakdown in communication. The toxic burn of envy doesn't start with a fully formed murder plot.
It starts small.
Exactly. You stop saying good morning. You stop making eye contact. You can't offer a kind word. Matthew Henry writes that where envy reigns, pity is banished, and humanity itself is forgotten.
Envy is like a slow poison. It starts in the heart, moves to the tongue, and eventually infects the hands.
And we see that infection completely take over when Joseph is sent by his father to check on his brothers out in Dothan.
Yeah, they see him coming in the distance. They can probably spot that ridiculous coat a mile away. And they say, "Behold, this dreamer cometh."
They strip him of the coat, which is the physical manifestation of their father's rejection of them, and they throw him into a dry cistern, just a pit in the desert.
And the detail that follows is, it's perhaps one of the most damning verses in ancient literature.
It really is. Genesis tells us that after throwing him in the pit, they sat down to eat bread.
While he's down there, screaming for his life, begging his own brothers for mercy.
It's just a devastating image of callousness. Henry notes that a great force put upon conscience commonly stupefies it.
They actively suppress their own humanity to the point where they feel absolutely no remorse.
They're acting worse than wild beasts, because even wild beasts don't casually eat a meal while listening to their own kin suffer like that. Envy had entirely blinded their reason.
So eventually they spot this passing caravan of Ishmaelite and Midianite merchants on the spice trade road, heading down to Egypt.
And Judah, which is a critical detail for later, Judah speaks up.
Right, Judah says, "What profit is it if we slay our brother? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites." So they sell him for 20 pieces of silver, the price of a disabled slave.
And then they dip the coat in the blood of a goat and take it back to their aged father, basically letting Jacob conclude that a wild animal tore his favorite son to pieces.
The ultimate cover-up. And at this point, the narrative momentum is incredibly strong. We are primed to follow Joseph down the trade route into the slave markets of Egypt.
But the text does something deeply frustrating to the modern reader.
It hits the brakes hard.
Yeah. Genesis 38 rips us away from Joseph entirely. It drops us into this dark, uncomfortable, self-contained story about Judah and his daughter-in-law, Tamar.
And this chapter is notorious. People often skip it because it's jarring. And honestly, it's highly offensive to modern sensibilities. It deals with levirate marriage customs, prostitution, deception, and just severe patriarchal power dynamics.
To make sense of why this chapter is even here, we really have to unpack the mechanics of what the text is describing.
Okay, let's unpack it.
So Judah has separated from his brothers. He marries a Canaanite woman, has 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. He gets a wife for his oldest son, Her name is Tamar.
But the text says was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he dies, which leaves Tamar as a childless widow.
Right, and in the ancient Near East, that was essentially an economic death sentence.
Because a widow without a son had no property rights.
Right. Exactly. No property rights, no means of providing for herself, no protector. She'd face starvation or be forced into horrific circumstances just to survive.
And that is exactly why the custom of levirate marriage existed. The word comes from the Latin lever, meaning husband's brother. It was this ancient socioeconomic safety net.
If a man died childless, his brother was obligated to marry the widow. The first son born of that union would carry the dead brother's name and inherit his property.
So it ensured the widow was cared for and the family land remained intact.
So Judah tells his second son, Onan, to perform this duty for Tamar. But Onan realizes that the child wouldn't legally be his. It wouldn't build his own legacy.
So he takes advantage of Tamar sexually, but intentionally practices coitus interruptus to ensure she doesn't get pregnant. He exploits her body while completely denying her the legal and economic protection of a child.
It's an act of profound greed and cruelty. It's a total violation of the social contract. And Onan is struck down as well.
So now Judah is terrified. He thinks Tamar is somehow cursed, like a black widow. He promises Tamar that his youngest son, Shelah, will fulfill the duty when he grows up.
But he sends her back to her father's house in widow's garments. And years pass. Shelah grows up, but Judah clearly has absolutely no intention of keeping his promise.
He abandons her to her economic doom out of his own fear. And Tamar realizes she's been discarded. She has no legal recourse in this system.
So she takes extreme, desperate measures.
Right. When she hears Judah is traveling to shear his sheep, she takes off her widow's garments, covers herself with a veil, and sits by the side of the road disguised as a prostitute.
And Judah, a man whose moral compass is entirely broken at this point, sees her. He doesn't recognize her because of the veil, and he solicits her.
They agree on a price, which is a young goat from his flock. But since he doesn't have the goat with him, Tamar demands a pledge, a security deposit, basically.
Right. Until he sends the payment, she asks for his signet ring, his bracelets, and his staff.
And we need to highlight what these items actually are, because these aren't just random trinkets.
No. In the ancient world, a signet ring and a carved staff were a man's unique identification. They were his signature.
They were used to seal legal documents. It's the ultimate proof of identity.
Exactly. So he hands over his identity, sleeps with her, and she conceives. Later, when Judah sends a friend with the goat to retrieve his items, the prostitute is nowhere to be found.
And then 3 months later, word reaches Judah. They tell him, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and behold, she is with child.
And Judah's reaction here is just the pinnacle of hypocrisy.
He doesn't hesitate for a second. He doesn't ask for a trial. He just commands, bring her forth and let her be burned.
He is so quick to act as the righteous judge, demanding the ultimate brutal penalty for her sexual sin while being completely and utterly blind to his own.
It's the timeless human flaw, isn't it? We judge others by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions.
Always. Judah is zealous in his condemnation. But as Tamar is being brought out to be executed, she doesn't scream or fight. She quietly sends the items to Judah with a message.
By the man whose these are, am I with child. Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and bracelets and staff.
And the moment those items are placed in front of him, the mirror is suddenly violently held up to his face.
The undeniable evidence of his own secret failure, his own exploitation, is just public. The signet ring is sitting right there. He is the man.
This is the turning point for Judah. In that moment of crushing conviction, with his hypocrisy laid completely bare, he could have doubled down.
He had the power to execute her anyway, just to cover his tracks.
But he doesn't. He looks at the items and says, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah my son.
He actually owns it. He publicly acknowledges his failure to keep his vow.
To circle back to why this jarring detour interrupts the Joseph narrative, it is a structural necessity. We have to see Judah's moral rock bottom.
Because he's the one who suggested selling Joseph into slavery.
Right. He is cold, calculating, and fundamentally selfish. By placing Genesis 38 here, the author establishes his baseline in the dirt. We see a man confronted by his own brokenness, taking his first agonizing step toward accountability.
If we don't understand how deep his hypocrisy runs here in Canaan, we'll never understand the magnitude of his transformation later in Egypt.
And it also poses an immediate, highly uncomfortable reflection for anyone listening.
Yeah, if you are listening right now, think about this. We all have a tendency to play the righteous judge. It's intoxicating to point the finger at the mistakes of our colleagues or the moral missteps of people on the internet.
But if the signet ring and staff of your own actions were presented to you, if your hidden hypocrisies, your broken promises were laid on the table, would you have the courage to stop deflecting?
The first step of any real moral growth is the brutal courage to look at the mirror and say, I am the problem. They have been more righteous than I.
That kind of radical self-honesty is so rare, and that moral failure in Canaan stands in absolute stark contrast to what is happening concurrently down in Egypt.
Which brings us to Genesis 39. We return to Joseph. The pampered teenager with a coat of many colors is gone.
He's been dragged across the desert and sold on the auction block to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard.
He has hit the absolute bottom of the ancient social ladder. He's a foreign slave with no rights, no family, and no future. And yet the text tells us something remarkable.
It says the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man. He doesn't just survive, he completely revolutionizes Potiphar's estate.
We have to understand what an Egyptian noble's estate looked like. Right?
Oh, it was a massive economic engine. Farms, livestock, servants, finances, international trade. And Joseph displays extreme administrative competence.
He's so effective that Potiphar essentially retires from managing his own life. The text says Potiphar left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not what he had, save the bread which he did eat.
Joseph rises from the auction block to become the CEO of a major ancient enterprise. But the moment he finds stability, he faces a completely different kind of crucible.
Potiphar's wife. She casts her eyes on Joseph. He's described as a goodly person and well-favored. So he's young, handsome, highly capable. And she begins to relentlessly demand that he sleep with her.
It is the ultimate stress test of integrity. In modern terms, we often define integrity as what you do when you're absolutely certain no one is watching.
Let's look at the parameters of this temptation. Joseph is entirely isolated from his family and his culture.
There's no community pressure keeping him in line.
None. He's a young man, biologically primed. The opportunity is presented by the lady of the house, meaning the power dynamic is vastly in her favor.
Complying could mean massive shortcuts to power and comfort. Refusing means risking the wrath of a woman who literally owns him.
And opportunity favors the crime. She waits until all the other men of the house are outside. They are completely alone.
His response is just a masterclass in moral clarity. It gives us deep insight into how he views the world. He doesn't just do a risk assessment on getting caught.
He tells her, "Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he have committed all that he hath to my hand. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?"
He recognizes the horizontal trust. His master has given him everything except her. But more importantly, he recognizes the vertical reality.
Right, he views the act as a fundamental violation of divine law. Sin isn't just breaking a social convention for him. It's an offense against the Creator.
Exactly. And when she physically grabs his garment, he doesn't try to reason with her anymore. He just slips out of the garment, leaves it in her hand, and runs out of the house. He flees.
But wait, I'm struggling with what happens next, and I think anyone reading this does too. Joseph does the exact right thing. He maintains his purity, his honesty, his loyalty to his boss.
He passes the test with flying colors.
Right, and his reward. She uses the garment to frame him for attempted assault. Potiphar believes his wife, and Joseph is given a one-way ticket to a royal dungeon.
It's infuriating.
If I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, what is the point? Why bother being good? Why maintain your integrity if it just gets you thrown into a literal hole in the ground while the liars sleep in silk beds?
It is the most valid, ancient, and persistent human reaction to injustice. We inherently want a transactional universe. I do good, I get good. I do bad, I get punished.
But this narrative just shatters that illusion.
It provides a sobering, vital reality check. Doing the right thing does not guarantee a smooth, prosperous path in this life. In fact, sometimes maintaining your integrity actively invites persecution.
The system will punish you for not playing its corrupt games.
But Matthew Henry's commentary on this specific moment is one of the most profound things I've read. He looks at Joseph running away naked, leaving his clothes behind, and writes, "He left his garment as one escaping for his life. It is better to lose a good coat than a good conscience."
Wow. It is better to lose a good coat than a good conscience. That's a stunning reframing of value.
The world values the coat, the status, the job title, the comfort, the reputation. Joseph valued his conscience.
If we look closely, there are fascinating parallels here to broader philosophical traditions that emerged centuries later, like Stoicism, really.
Definitely. Epictetus, a Greek Stoic philosopher who ironically also spent time as a slave, argued that true freedom is an internal state. A man can have his body thrown in chains, but no one can compel his will. Virtue is its own reward.
And Joseph embodies that completely.
Yeah.
Even inside the royal prison, which in ancient Egypt wasn't just a cell, but likely a harsh labor camp for political prisoners, he refuses to wallow in self-pity.
He doesn't become bitter or cynical. He just gets to work.
He maintains his excellence in the dark. The keeper of the prison sees his character and puts him in charge of the other prisoners. Joseph is paradoxically a free man because his conscience is clear, even behind bars.
And it's in that administrative role within the prison that the plot begins to turn. Two high-ranking officials of Pharaoh, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, offend the king and are thrown into Joseph's ward.
They both have troubling, vivid dreams on the same night. They're deeply distressed because there's no interpreter available.
Joseph sees their distress, asks them about it, and immediately attributes the power of interpretation to God.
The cupbearer dreams of a vine with 3 branches that blossoms and produces grapes, which he squeezes into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph interprets that in 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position.
And the baker dreams of 3 baskets of baked goods on his head, and birds are eating them. Joseph delivers the hard truth. In 3 days, Pharaoh will hang you, and the birds will eat your flesh.
Both interpretations come true exactly as stated. But before the cupbearer leaves the prison to return to his life of luxury, Joseph makes a single, desperate plea.
He says, "Think on me when it shall be well with thee, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house."
He says, "I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." It's the plea of a man who has maintained his faith but is desperate for justice.
And the final verse of Genesis 40 delivers one of the most crushing blows in the entire story. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him.
The crushing weight of human ingratitude. Joseph waits. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into 2 full years.
2 years of waking up in a dungeon, knowing the man who could free him with a single sentence, simply couldn't be bothered to remember him.
The psychological toll of that, what Viktor Frankl would later call the agony of a provisional existence where you have no idea when or if your suffering will end, is unimaginable.
If you are listening to this right now, this is where ancient text meets modern reality. Are you sitting in a situation where you feel completely forgotten?
Maybe you've been passed over for a promotion you earned, or you've been falsely accused, or you poured your life into helping someone who walked away and never looked back. You feel trapped in an unfair environment.
The profound challenge of Joseph's life is this: do not let your unfair circumstances rot your character. Your environment does not dictate your ethics.
Excellence in the dark, when no one is clapping for you, is the only thing that prepares you for the light.
And the light does eventually come. It breaks with explosive suddenness in Genesis 41. We are now 2 full years after the cupbearer forgot him. The geopolitical landscape is about to shift permanently.
Pharaoh himself has 2 terrifying dreams. He stands by the Nile and watches 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river, only to be eaten by 7 starving, horrific-looking cows.
Then he dreams of 7 plump ears of grain being swallowed by 7 withered, thin ears.
He wakes up deeply troubled. He calls all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, and Egypt was the intellectual center of the ancient world. They were filled with highly trained priests who specialized in dream manuals and omens.
But they are entirely baffled. None of their systems work on this dream.
And it is at this exact moment of national crisis that the cupbearer's memory is suddenly jogged. He remembers his own fault and tells Pharaoh about the Hebrew slave in the dungeon who accurately interpreted the dreams.
Pharaoh wastes no time. He sends for Joseph. The text notes that they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. He shaved himself, changed his clothes, and came before Pharaoh.
That detail about shaving is historically brilliant, isn't it?
It really is. Canaanites and Hebrews wore full beards. Egyptians despised facial hair. Priests and nobility were often completely hairless.
So Joseph understands the cultural protocol of the room he's walking into. He adapts instantly without compromising his core identity.
Pharaoh says, "I've had a dream, and I hear you can understand it." And Joseph's response is incredibly bold for a slave standing before a god king. He deflects the praise.
He says, "It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." He listens to the dreams and delivers the interpretation without hesitation.
He explains that the 2 dreams are one. The 7 fat cows and 7 plump ears represent 7 coming years of unprecedented, massive agricultural abundance throughout the land of Egypt.
And the thin cows and withered ears represent 7 years of famine that will immediately follow, a famine so severe, so absolute that it will entirely consume the land and erase the memory of the good years.
This is where Joseph's genius truly shines. He doesn't just offer a mystical interpretation, drop the mic, and ask for a pardon.
Right. He pivots instantly, seamlessly, from a prophet into a macroeconomist and crisis manager.
Albert Barnes comments on this pivot, noting that Joseph's native simplicity of heart, practical good sense, and sheer force of character break forth. He tells Pharaoh, "Look at a man discreet and wise and set him over the land of Egypt."
He proposes a massive, centralized logistical intervention. He outlines a plan to establish a vast taxation, and supply chain network.
During the 7 years of plenty, the government must take a fifth 20% of all the harvest in Egypt.
They need to build massive granaries in every city to store the food under Pharaoh's guard, holding it in reserve against the 7 years of famine so the nation doesn't perish.
We really have to pause and consider the sheer logistical magnitude of what he's proposing. Egyptian agriculture relied entirely on the annual inundation of the Nile.
The grain they produced, emmer wheat and barley, was the backbone of their economy.
Storing 20% of a massive surplus for 7 years without it falling victim to rot, mold, or pests requires an astonishing level of infrastructure.
It means organizing tens of thousands of workers, building specialized mud brick silos that could be hermetically sealed, utilizing desiccants, and managing a sprawling bureaucracy of scribes and overseers.
Joseph is basically proposing the creation of the Federal Reserve, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and a nationalized supply chain.
And he's doing it off the cuff while standing before a monarch who could execute him on a whim.
And Pharaoh recognizes the unparalleled brilliance of the plan. He looks at his advisors and asks, "Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?"
He turns to Joseph and says, "There is none so discreet and wise as thou art." In one sentence, he elevates Joseph from a forgotten prisoner to the Grand Vizier of Egypt, second only to the throne.
He puts his own signet ring on Joseph's hand, clothes him in fine linen, and puts a gold chain around his neck.
The contrast is just breathtaking. At 17, his father gave him a coat, and it almost got him murdered. At 30, the most powerful king on earth gives him the royal seal, and it saves nations.
It highlights a critical dual skill set for true leadership. Translating this to modern reality, profound insight, the ability to see what is coming, to interpret the times, to have spiritual or strategic vision, is largely useless if it isn't paired with extreme administrative competence.
You can have the greatest vision in the world, but if you don't know how to build the logistical framework, the spreadsheets, the teams, and the operational systems to execute it, people will still starve.
Joseph had both.
And he executes the plan flawlessly. He travels throughout all the land of Egypt. The text says he gathered grain as the sand of the sea until they stopped keeping track because it was beyond measure.
And when the 7 years of plenty end, the famine hits exactly as predicted. The famine was over all the face of the earth, but in Egypt there was bread.
But we must address an obstacle to growth here, a part of the text that often makes modern readers deeply uncomfortable. If we jump ahead slightly to Genesis 47, we see the long-term economic reality of Joseph's crisis management.
Right. It gets grim. The famine is so severe that the people run out of money to buy the grain Joseph stored. So they come to him and say, "Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For our money faileth."
Joseph says, "Give your cattle." He takes all their horses, flocks, and herds in exchange for a year of food.
And the next year, the famine continues. They have no money and no livestock, so they come back and say, "We have nothing left but our bodies and our lands. Buy us and our land for bread, and we will be servants unto Pharaoh."
Joseph buys all the land of Egypt for the crown. He centralizes absolute wealth and power into the autocratic state, turning the entire population into tenant farmers who must pay a permanent 20% tax on their crops forever.
Reading that through a modern lens, especially for those steeped in democratic ideals, human rights, and free market economics, it looks like predatory statecraft.
It looks like he is exploiting a natural disaster to enslave a population for a tyrant.
It's a very natural modern reaction, but this requires careful discernment. We must distinguish between the descriptive history of ancient statecraft and prescriptive, timeless economic ideals.
The text is recording historical crisis management during a Bronze Age absolute monarchy. To survive a 7-year total agricultural collapse in the ancient world required draconian centralization.
We cannot judge ancient feudal survival mechanics by 21st century democratic standards. The text isn't demanding modern nations adopt this model.
We shouldn't blindly endorse the method just because Joseph did it.
Exactly. We extract the enduring wisdom, not the specific socioeconomic policy. And the enduring wisdom is the absolute necessity of foresight.
Joseph understood a fundamental rhythm of life. The seasons of plenty are not permanent. The fat cows will always be followed by the thin cows. The surplus is given specifically to prepare for the deficit.
Gathering time. That is the operational principle.
If you are listening to this, look at the landscape of your life right now. What 7 years of plenty are you experiencing? Maybe you are in a season of vibrant physical health, or you have a massive financial surplus, or deep emotional bandwidth, and a wide circle of strong relationships.
The temptation is to consume everything you produce. But the wisdom of Joseph asks, what specific systems are you building right now to sustain you when the inevitable famine hits?
Because the famine, the health crisis, the market crash, the devastating loss will come. Are you saving your financial resources? Are you investing deeply in friendships that will carry you through a season of grief?
Are you building habits of mental and spiritual resilience now before you need them? Do not consume the surplus of the good years. Store it.
Is the only way to survive the lean years. And while Joseph is managing the macro crisis of a global famine from the palaces of Egypt, a micro crisis, the ghost of his own past, arrives right at his doorstep.
This brings us to the crucible of reconciliation in Genesis 42 through 44.
The famine is so widespread that it hits Canaan hard. Jacob, the aging patriarch, realizes his family is going to starve. He hears there's grain in Egypt, so he sends his 10 oldest sons down to buy food.
He keeps his youngest son, Benjamin, Joseph's full brother, the only other child of Rachel, at home, terrified of losing him too.
The 10 brothers arrive at the Egyptian distribution center. They walk in, see the powerful governor of the land, and they bow down with their faces to the earth before him.
It is the exact, literal fulfillment of the teenage dream that got him thrown into the pit 20 years ago. The sheaves of wheat are bowing down.
Joseph recognizes them instantly, but they have absolutely no idea who he is. He's dressed like an Egyptian noble, speaking through an interpreter, holding the power of life and death.
And instead of revealing himself and rushing to embrace them, he speaks roughly to them. He accuses them of being foreign spies sent to see the nakedness of the land.
This is where I have to object, or at least voice what I know everyone is thinking. He throws them in prison for 3 days. Then he lets 9 of them go, but binds Simeon in front of their eyes to keep as a hostage.
He tells them they must bring their youngest brother Benjamin back to Egypt to prove their story.
Later, when they do bring Benjamin back, he feasts with them, but then secretly orders his steward to plant his own personal silver divination cup in Benjamin's sack of grain.
He lets them leave the city, then sends his guards to chase them down, arrest them, and threaten to make Benjamin his permanent slave.
It feels completely vindictive. It feels like a man who has been handed absolute power, using it to psychologically torture the men who abused him.
It looks exactly like vengeance. It looks like a power trip. But if we analyze the psychology of what he is doing, it is actually a meticulously crafted, incredibly high-stakes moral stress test.
Joseph is entirely motivated by a single burning question. Are these the same men who ate bread while I cried in a pit?
He has to know if they have changed. If they're the same callous, envious murderers they were 20 years ago, introducing himself and bringing them into the heart of Egyptian power would be catastrophic.
So Joseph doesn't just ask them if they are sorry. He recreates the exact same psychological conditions that existed when they sold him.
He builds a behavioral trap. Think about the parallels. Benjamin is now the favored son of the father. He is the last remaining child of the beloved wife.
By planting the cup in Benjamin's sack, Joseph provides the older brothers with the perfect legal opportunity to get rid of the favored son.
They can say, look, he stole from the governor. It's his own fault. We have to go back to our families. They can leave Benjamin in slavery in Egypt and save their own skins, just like they did 20 years ago.
It's a crucible. Will they throw another brother to the wolves?
And this reveals the core wisdom regarding human conflict in this narrative. True reconciliation requires evidence of repentance. Cheap apologies do not rebuild trust.
When the cup is found in Benjamin's sack, the brothers don't shrug and walk away. The text says they rent their clothes in absolute horror.
They load their donkeys and willingly march back into the jaws of the Egyptian state, standing beside the condemned boy.
They fall to the ground before Joseph. And it is Judah, the man we saw hit moral rock bottom with Tamar, the man who originally engineered the plot to sell Joseph for 20 pieces of silver, who steps up to speak.
Genesis 44 records his speech, and it is widely considered one of the most masterful, moving pieces of rhetoric in antiquity.
It is a masterpiece of pathos. Judah doesn't offer legal defense. He doesn't make excuses. He recounts the entire painful history to the governor.
He explains that if they return without the boy, the shock and grief will literally kill their aged father. He paints a picture of a broken old man whose life is bound up in the life of the child.
And then the climax of the speech and the climax of Judah's entire life. He says to the governor, "Now therefore, I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brethren."
Substitutionary sacrifice. Matthew Henry points out the profound transformation here. Judah excels in boldness, wisdom, and incredibly in tenderness for his father.
The man who was once perfectly willing to sell his brother into slavery for profit is now begging to sell himself into slavery to save his brother.
He offers to bear the blame. He offers his own freedom, his own life to absorb the punishment. He proves, through agonizing action under extreme pressure, that his heart is fundamentally changed.
This is the modern translation for anyone navigating deeply fractured relationships today. We crave the warm hug of reconciliation, but we often want to skip the crucible of repentance.
I'm sorry you felt that way doesn't fix a broken marriage. My bad doesn't repair years of betrayal.
Real trust is only rebuilt when people demonstrate through their actions over time and under pressure that they will no longer make the same destructive choices.
Conversely, if you are the one who has been deeply wronged, the text suggests that true reconciliation might require you to be shrewd. It might require you to look for actual evidence of changed behavior before you fully reopen your life and your vulnerability to someone who harmed you.
If you are the offender, have you offered to bear the blame as Judah did? Have you absorbed the cost to prove your transformation, or are you just impatiently demanding to be trusted again?
Judah absorbed the cost, and that incredible act of sacrifice shatters Joseph's emotional defenses. It brings us to the culmination of the epic in Genesis 45 and the theological conclusion in chapter 50.
Judah's speech breaks Joseph completely. He can no longer maintain the facade. He orders all the Egyptian guards and attendants out of the room.
He is left alone with the men who destroyed his youth. And he begins to weep so loudly that the Egyptians outside and the house of Pharaoh hear it.
He speaks to them in Hebrew, the language of their childhood. And he says the words that completely shatter their reality. I am Joseph, doth my father yet live?
Try to imagine the sheer, suffocating terror of the brothers in that split second. The governor of Egypt, the man who holds absolute, unchecked power of life and death over them, the man who has just framed them for theft.
Is the brother they threw in a pit and sold to human traffickers? They are utterly speechless. The text says they were troubled, terrified at his presence.
But Joseph doesn't call the executioners. He doesn't take his revenge. He tells them to come near. He embraces them.
And he delivers one of the most profound, mind-bending theological frameworks in the entire ancient text. He says, Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life.
He immediately radically reframes the entire 20-year nightmare. He doesn't minimize their crime. He acknowledges they sold him. But he superimposes a higher divine purpose over their malicious actions.
He sends them back to Canaan with wagons, wealth, and provisions to bring Jacob and the entire extended family, 70 people in total, down to Egypt, giving them the fertile region of Goshen to survive the remaining 5 years of famine.
Jacob is brought down. The reunion between the old patriarch and his favorite son is beautiful. Jacob gets to live out his final 17 years in peace in Egypt. He blesses his sons, and then he passes away.
But the moment Jacob dies, the brothers' terror returns.
The ghost of their guilt still haunts them. They project their own Machiavellian worldview onto Joseph. They think Joseph was just holding his grudge while Dad was alive out of respect.
Now that the old man is gone, the restraints are off, he will finally take his revenge and crush us. They send a desperate message begging for forgiveness, throwing themselves down as his servants.
And Joseph weeps again. He's heartbroken that after everything, after decades of provision, they still don't understand his heart, and they still don't understand the theology of what happened.
In Genesis 50, he delivers the ultimate thesis of this entire epic. He looks at his terrified brothers and asks, Am I in God's stead?
Am I in the place of God? It is a rejection of the judge's seat.
And then he says the most famous line, But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive.
This is the pinnacle of the text wisdom, and it is a massive philosophical achievement. It beautifully, seamlessly synthesizes two realities that seem entirely contradictory to the human mind.
On one hand, human beings have agency. They make real, malicious, destructive choices for which they are morally responsible. The brothers thought evil, and they were, as they admitted earlier, verily guilty.
But on the other hand, a sovereign God takes those very betrayals, those exact malicious actions, and weaves them into a massive redemptive tapestry of salvation.
God doesn't just come in after the fact and clean up the evil. He actively utilizes the evil actions of men to accomplish the ultimate good.
Exactly. If we want a comparative insight from modern psychology, we can look at the work of Viktor Frankl. Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who survived the horrific atrocities of the Nazi concentration camps.
Out of that darkness, he developed logotherapy. His central argument was that Human beings can endure almost any amount of suffering, any level of trauma, if they can find the meaning in it. Despair, he said, is suffering without meaning.
And Joseph finds the ultimate meaning. He doesn't excuse his brother's abuse. He doesn't engage in toxic positivity and say, hey, getting sold into slavery was actually a great learning experience.
He looks him in the eye and says, you meant it for evil. But he finds the meaning by reframing his trauma into a mission of preservation.
His suffering, his descent into the pit and the dungeon, was the exact necessary vehicle that put him in the position to save nations and his own family from starving to death.
That shift in paradigm is profoundly challenging for how we handle our own deep wounds. If you're listening to this right now, think about a deep hurt, a betrayal, or a massive, unfair setback in your past that you are still carrying.
We all have them. The brutal firing, the friend who stabbed you in the back, the false accusation, the broken family dynamic.
Our natural, visceral instinct is to play in God's stead. We want to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. We want to take our revenge, or at the very least, we want to harbor a cold, bitter resentment that rots us from the inside out.
Joseph challenges us to step down from the judge's seat. He invites us to look at our scars through a much wider, grander lens.
How might that exact painful experience uniquely qualify you to help someone else today? If you have been dragged through the dark valley of a specific grief, a specific addiction, or specific betrayal, you possess a map of that valley.
You're uniquely equipped to guide someone else who is just now walking into that exact same darkness.
You can reframe your pain into a mission of preservation for others. It doesn't erase the pain you went through, but it redeems it. It gives it a purpose that completely transcends the initial malice.
As we wrap up this massive narrative, we have to look at how it structurally ends. Before Jacob dies in Genesis 49, he gathers his sons around his bed to prophesy over them and give them their final blessings.
This is the moment where the future of the tribes of Israel is permanently established. And this is the final provocative thought I want to leave everyone with.
If you were building a nation based on pure meritocracy, based on moral purity, you would expect Jacob to disqualify the worst offenders in his family.
He knows everything now. He knows about Reuben's instability and sexual sin with his concubine. He knows about Simeon and Levi's psychotic, violent anger when they massacred a city earlier in Genesis.
He knows about Judah's hypocrisy with Tamar and his leading role in selling Joseph into slavery. These men have horrendous, bloody pasts.
By all metrics of modern reputation management, they should be fired from the family enterprise. They are massive liabilities.
And yet, despite their staggering failures, they are not discarded. They are still named as the literal foundations of the future tribes.
In fact, Judah, the one who sold Joseph and slept with his daughter-in-law, is given the highest blessing. The scepter will not depart from Judah. From his flawed, messy bloodline will come the kings of Israel and ultimately the Messiah.
It's a powerful, lingering reminder. Your past failures, no matter how egregious, no matter how deeply you have fractured your own life, do not disqualify you from being part of the future narrative.
The ancient text makes it abundantly clear. Grace does not wait for perfect people. Grace builds the future using deeply flawed, broken people who are willing to finally tell the truth.
That is profound.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.